The smaller half of the Bakura prison station had managed to slow its descent to the surface of the Earth by firing what repulsors were still attached to the superstructure. But the impact was still tremendous. Toxic fumes and liquids of unknown origins seeped out, creating an uninhabitable area around the wreck. First responders did their best to contain the flood of prisoners, but ultimately they were unable to stop the initial onslaught of survivors who were desperate to get away from the toxic crash site. Eventually, the threat was contained and a 30-mile radius perimeter circle was set up. 2 weeks later, the remaining aliens were pushed to within a 5-mile radius of the crash site. And a few days later, what prisoners were left either died trying to breach the red line or starved to death. Despite wielding powerful small arms weapons, the aliens lacked the organization and air support of the US military, and were quickly destroyed. Roughly around the same time, a joint force of Chinese and Russian armed forces were also able to contain the threat around their crash site. But before even the last aliens were eliminated, the temporary alliance between the two superpowers fell apart. Russia and China scrambled to claim any technology from the crash site that they could get their hands on. This naturally led to some skirmishes. Fearing a rapid escalation of hostilities, both sides had called for a ceasefire. Hi friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan. This is part 4 of our First Order vs. Earth series. It's roughly a year later since first contact with the aliens. The First Order has firmly entrenched their position in a number of smaller countries after offering to help them hunt down the hundreds of thousands of alien prisoners that had been released on Sol 3 due to the actions by the organization called the Resistance. Because these smaller nations were the first to embrace the First Order, they were also the first nations to get rid of their alien prisoners. Even after the threat was neutralized, the First Order continued giving. It was their way of apologizing for the damages their prisoners had done to the world. First Order sponsored clinics were beginning to pop up all around the world, and Sol 3 doctors and scientists were invited to learn and share their findings. Limb and organ replacement surgery and prosthetic technologies leapt forward, and many previous untreatable illnesses were now treatable. The First Order even retooled a military-grade biochip to allow users to monitor their health and integrate them with their smartphones, TVs, and even cars. These chips were especially popular amongst the younger generations who were eager to embrace the new technology. The First Order was everywhere and everything anyone talked about, and those who didn't have access to all the wonderful tech wanted it even more. General Hux was a gracious leader. He never held it against countries who refused his help. He understood their suspicion. He was an unknown entity, but he knew over time they would all come around eventually. And when those world leaders came knocking at his door, he would accept them into his arms without bitterness or anger. After all he wanted was the best for the inhabitants of Sol 3. And as he predicted, one by one countries opened their borders to the First Order until only a few nations were left. There was Russia and China still locked in a stalemate over the alien crash site. Then there was the United States, who managed to convince some of its closest strategic allies, along with its two bordering countries, Mexico and Canada, to resist the First Order. There was a new position in the president's cabinet. This individual's sole purpose was to advise the president about all things related to the First Order. And they had chosen well, because few other individuals had as much experience with the First Order as the Wookiee Zhao Kala. After the amnesia had worn off, the Wookiee recalled his past as a resistance fighter. At first, the US military didn't believe Zhao Kala's theory about inhibitor chips, but after running some tests in the field and autopsies on enemy combatants, it was established that these individuals were being controlled by some remote signal. Zhao Kala was upgraded from being a prisoner to an observer, where he helped scientists determine how they could safely remove these chips from their host. The stalemate was pointless. The Chinese and the Russians both possessed an enormous stockpile of nuclear weapons, way more tanks, artillery, and soldiers than necessary to secure the crash site. If the fighting began again, there was no telling what would happen, but both sides and international observers agreed the alien tech would be destroyed. Even worse, their shared enemy, the United States, had access to their own crash site for several months now unharassed. No one was surprised when the ceasefire eventually broke. Russian infantry quickly crossed over the agreed DMZ area and slaughtered the unprepared Chinese units. What was surprising was the Russian SOC troops were equipped with blasters. Russia had secretly been colluding with the First Order. Not wanting to give up the alien technology to their enemies, the Chinese had a tactical nuke in the air before even their own troops had withdrawn from the target. Several hundred First Order troopers died in the attack, and within hours, General Hux had declared war on China. It was the largest yield weapon to have ever been detonated in anger on this planet. Ironically, even with the new aliens' arrival, it had been humans who had caused the most destruction so far. Upon comparing the biochips extracted from dead prisoners and the ones the First Order were giving out in their clinics, the US found many startling similarities, including a backdoor which could cause severe pain to its hosts. The pieces were beginning to fall together. The First Order's true intentions had been found. But so far, US leadership had been hesitant to tell anyone, including their closest allies. Once the news was out, the First Order with their small fleet in low orbit could quickly eliminate the United States' ability to fight back. They had to find a way to warn the world, quietly. This would be difficult to do. Although the United States and our allies prevented the First Order from opening clinics in their territory, it didn't mean that their citizens couldn't go overseas to get one. Joe Cola had told the US government that these inhibitor chips could stream information 2 ways. This means the First Order could be spying on any individual who was wearing the chip. The CIA came up with a plan. 12 different agents were given mid-level diplomatic positions that were suitable for the country they were tasked with connecting with. Briefed on the situation and given scanners that could detect biochips, these agents were to hand-deliver information on the First Order to the United States' remaining allies. Once the First Order figured out what they were doing, the Wookiee would launch a distress signal and hope that help would come. Without help from the Resistance, it would be very unlikely humanity could take over the Resurgence-class battlecruiser in low orbit over Sol 3, the most likely location for where the transmitter for the inhibitor chips were being kept. The South Korean Vice Minister of Defense was a busy man. Just for work, he had 5 different cell phones, one of which was an encrypted hotline directly to the Pentagon. The idea of a chip that could integrate all of that information into one location was too good to be true. And with the conflict between China and Russia growing, and the detonation of a 1 megaton nuclear weapon on the western border of his country, the Vice Minister of Defense was busier than ever. He had been in the Philippines during a joint military exercise. On one of the less busier days, he had gone to one of these clinics and had a chip installed. And he was wearing that chip as the South Korean president briefed his advisors on the information he had just received about the First Order from the United States. That's where we're going to end off today's episode, guys. Don't forget to hit that subscribe and notification button so you don't miss out on the rest of this series. And a special thanks to all you Patreon supporters out there. If you've gotten this far, that means the First Order has not censored this broadcast yet. So if you're watching this, you are the Resistance. I mean, Generation Tech.